Are you ready to have your mind blown? Because today, we're diving into the simulation theory, one of the most controversial theories out there. This is the idea that our entire universe, everything we see, touch, and experience, might just be a program, a simulation, a computer game. Crazy, right? But stick around because we're going to explore the evidence for and against it. Now let's start with a thought experiment proposed by the Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi. Imagine a guy who's been locked up in a cave his whole life. He's never seen the outside world. All he sees are shadows dancing on the cave wall from objects that are actually being manipulated behind him. What does this guy think is real? The shadows or the objects casting them? Now imagine that one day he breaks free from his chains, steps outside, and sees the real world for the first time. He realizes that what he saw in the cave was just a pale imitation of reality. Could this story be an analogy for us? Are we like the chained guy, mistaking our limited perceptions for the full picture of reality? Well, the simulation theory takes this idea a step further. It proposes that our entire universe is like that cave, a simulation created by a more advanced civilization. But if this is true, why do we keep experiencing things like gravity and time passing, things that don't exist in a computer program? Well, according to the theory, these sensations are all part of the program. They're just ways of making the simulation feel more real. And here's where it gets really trippy. If we're in a simulation, then the people who created it could theoretically manipulate our reality at will. They could change the laws of physics or create new universes simply by tweaking some code. In fact, they could be doing it already. Some people believe that certain unexplained phenomena, like UFOs, are evidence of this kind of manipulation. So how strong is the evidence for the simulation theory? Surprisingly, it's pretty solid. Let's start with the fact that we can run simulations on computers that are indistinguishable from the real world. Take, for example, this paper published in the journal Nature. Scientists created a simulation of a quantum computer and found that it exhibited the same properties as a real quantum computer. The simulated qubits, the quantum equivalent of bits, were indistinguishable from real qubits. This shows that it's possible to simulate reality down to the subatomic level. But what about the universe as a whole? Well, some physicists argue that our universe is just too perfect to be real. Take, for example, the cosmological constant, a value that determines the rate of expansion of the universe. If you look at the mathematics of the universe, you'll find that the cosmological constant has a value of 120. But if you look at the physics, you'll find that its value should be 120 orders of magnitude smaller than observed. In other words, the universe as we know, it should be collapsing in on itself. But it's not. So either our math is wrong, or our physics is wrong, or we're in a simulation where the programmers made a mistake. There's even evidence that the laws of physics are fine-tuned for life itself. Take, for example, the strong nuclear force, which holds atomic nuclei together. If this force were even slightly weaker, stars wouldn't be able to produce the elements necessary for life. Or take gravity. If gravity were slightly stronger, Earth would have formed a supermassive planet instead of a nice cushy place for humans to live. Some scientists argue that these are just coincidences, but others argue that it's more likely that we're in a simulation where the programmers intentionally set the laws of physics to support life. What's even crazier is that the universe seems to have been fine-tuned not just for life, but for intelligent life. Take, for example, the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang. This radiation is so uniform that it implies that there was some kind of process that smoothed it out. Otherwise, it would have been much more lumpy. And that process is known as inflation, where the universe expanded exponentially in a fraction of a second. But inflation only works if the inflattened field, which drives inflation, decays within a very narrow range of times. If it decayed too quickly, there wouldn't be enough time for the universe to stabilize. If it decayed too slowly, there would be too much matter in the universe and not enough radiation. And guess what? Our inflattened field did exactly that. It decayed in a way that produced the perfect conditions for life. Some scientists say it's a coincidence, but I say it's food for thought. We haven't even mentioned the Fermi paradox, which points out that if there are so many Earth-like planets out there, why haven't we found any aliens yet? Maybe it's because we're in a simulation and the programmers are keeping us all to ourselves. Or maybe it's because we're the only ones who got through the quality control checks while all the other simulations were scrapped. But hold on a minute. Even if we are in a simulation, why should we care? It's not like it's going to change our daily lives, right? Wrong. There are some simulations that seem to be affecting our reality. For example, virtual reality is becoming more and more realistic. And who has to say that we won't eventually reach a point where it is indistinguishable from the real world? If we can create simulations that affect our brains, then it's only a matter of time before someone else does it too. And it's not just VR. Think about the internet. It's basically a form of shared hallucination. In other words, the internet is a simulation of sorts, and it's already having a profound effect on our brains. In fact, technology in general is blurring the line between reality and simulation. Take, for example, self-driving cars. If you've ever ridden in a self-driving car, you've probably noticed that it takes a while for it to make decisions. That's because it is constantly bombarded with data from its sensors, and it has to process all of that data before making a decision. In other words, it's simulating human behavior, and the more data it collects, the better it becomes at simulating. And here's the thing. Technology is only going to get more realistic. In a few years, self-driving cars will be indistinguishable from cars driven by humans. And when that happens, we'll have to decide whether to trust algorithms over human drivers. Okay, now let's talk about some arguments against the simulation theory. The main argument is that there's no evidence for it. We can't prove or disprove it, but we can't rule out the possibility either. Yeah, sure, we can run simulations on computers that are indistinguishable from the real world, but that doesn't mean that our universe is a simulation. It's just an example of how complex systems can emerge from simple rules. For example, take a look at this image. What do you see? Chances are you see two overlapping circles, but that's not what the image actually is. The image is just a bunch of pixels arranged in a particular way. But because our brains are wired to recognize patterns, we see something meaningful in the noise. In other words, reality is what we perceive it to be, not what it actually is. And if we can't trust our own perceptions, then how can we trust anything? That's why the simulation theory is such a hard pill to swallow. It challenges our intuition about the nature of reality. If we're in a simulation, then what does that mean for free will? If our actions are pre-programmed, then we're just puppets of the programmers. But if we're not programmed, then what gives us the right to believe that we're in a simulation in the first place? I know it's a lot to wrap your head around, but don't worry, you don't need to choose a side in this debate. The important thing is to keep an open mind and be willing to question our assumptions about the nature of reality. Who knows, maybe one day we'll find out that we're in a simulation. But until then, let's enjoy the ride and try to make sense of this crazy world we live in. Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And as always, stay curious.